he spent 730 days mourning a ghost. Declan O'Malley, the Alpha King of the Stone River Territory, had buried an empty casket 2 years ago, believing his mate had driven her car off Blackwood Bridge. But the bond never fully snapped. It just went silent. Last night, a catastrophic blizzard hit the northern ridges, and in the howling wind, he caught a scent that shouldn't exist. Not of death, but of milk, blood, and fear. When he tore through the brush to find her, he didn't just find his missing wife. He found her half frozen, her body acting as a human shield over a pile of whimpering fur. She wasn't just surviving, she was guarding a miracle that would bring the kingdom to its knees. You are not ready for what happens in the infirmary. The rain in the Pacific Northwest doesn't wash things clean. It just presses the dirt deeper into the earth. It was a torrential, freezing downpour that had turned the erratic terrain of the Stone River Territory into a mudslide waiting to happen. Declan O'Malley wiped rain from his eyes, his boots sinking inches deep into the slurry of pine needles and mud. At 6'4", with the build of a man who moved mountains for a living, he usually commanded the elements. But tonight, the Alpha King felt small. "Alpha, we need to turn back," came the static-laced voice of Kieran. His beta, over the radio. "The thermal drones are grounded. The storm is a whiteout up at the ridge. If there are rogues up there, they're dead already." Declan pressed the talk button, his jaw tight. "I didn't ask for a weather report, Kieran. I said sweep the northern sector. I smelled something." "It's a ghost scent, Dec." Kieran's voice was softer now, dropping the formalities. "It happens near the anniversary. Please, come home." Declan released the button, nearly crushing the plastic casing. The anniversary. 2 years since Sienna Brooks, his Luna, his soul, the woman who had taught him that power didn't mean cruelty, had vanished. The police found her sedan in the river. They never found the body. The pack assumed she had been taken by the current. Declan had assumed he had failed her. But the scent hitting him tonight wasn't a memory. It was distinct. Jasmine and ozone. The smell of a storm about to break. And underneath that, the metallic tang of fresh blood. Declan shifted. Bones cracked and reformed. Fur sprouted in thick, obsidian waves. And where a man once stood, a massive black wolf now tore up the incline. He ignored the burning in his lungs. The wolf instinct took over, locking onto a faint heat signature that his human eyes couldn't see. He climbed higher than any patrol usually dared, up to the ruins of the old fire watchtower, a structure abandoned since the fires of '98. The wind here was a scream, tearing at his fur. He slowed down as he approached the base of the tower. The scent was overwhelming now. It smelled of sickness. It smelled of life. He shifted back to human form, shivering violently as the freezing rain hit his bare skin. But he didn't care. He ripped the rusted door of the tower's storage cellar open. It was pitch black inside. Declan pulled a tactical flashlight from the mesmerizing pile of clothes he'd left at the ridgeline hours ago. No, that wasn't right. He was naked, vulnerable. He squinted into the dark, his wolf vision adjusting to the gloom. "Sienna?" he rasped. The name felt foreign on his tongue. There was a low growl. It was weak, wet, and terrifyingly familiar. In the corner of the cellar, huddled on a bed of rotten sleeping bags and dried moss, was a figure. She was skeletal, her collarbones protruding sharply against pale, dirt-streaked skin. Her hair, once a vibrant chestnut, was matted and dull. But her eyes, those golden hazel eyes, burned with a ferocity that stopped the Alpha King dead in his tracks. Sienna didn't look at him with love. She looked at him with terror. "Don't!" she cracked, her voice like grinding glass. She tried to raise a hand to ward him off, but her arm collapsed. She was hypothermic, her lips blue. Declan took a step forward, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. "Sienna, my God, you're alive. I'm going to get you." "No!" she shrieked, the sound tearing her throat. She curled tighter into a ball, hunching over something. That's when Declan heard it. A chorus of high-pitched mews. Not one, not two. He stepped closer, ignoring her weak strikes against his shins. He knelt, the smell of milk and afterbirth hitting him hard. The heat radiating from her was intense. She was burning up with a fever, yet her skin was ice-cold to the touch. Gently, firmly, Declan pulled the tattered wool blanket away from her chest. He stopped breathing. Lying against her stomach, fighting for space, seeking heat, was a writhing pile of puppies. Tiny, blind, newborn wolves. He counted them instantly, his alpha brain processing the impossible data. 1, 2, 3, 2, 9. There were 9 of them, a mix of russet, black, and spotted gray. A litter of 9 was biologically impossible for a werewolf. Twins were rare. Triplets were a royal blessing. 9 was a death sentence for the mother. Mine, Sienna whispered, her eyes rolling back into her head as the adrenaline finally failed her. Don't. Let them. Take. She slumped forward, unconscious, her body going limp over the squirming mass. Declan caught her before she hit the concrete floor. He looked at the pups, 9 tiny heartbeats syncing with his own. He looked at the black pup in the center, the one that yawned, revealing a tiny tongue. The pup had a white star on its chest, the exact mark Declan had on his own left pectoral. The world tilted on its axis. These weren't just random strays she had adopted. These were his, but she had been gone for 2 years. The math didn't work. The biology didn't work. But as Declan scooped Sienna and the 9 miracles into his arms, wrapping them in his own body heat, he knew one thing. Whoever had kept her here, whoever had hidden this from him, was going to die. And if Sienna died tonight, he would burn the world down to find them. The emergency doors of the Stone River Pack Hospital burst open, shattering the quiet hum of the night shift. "Clear the trauma room," Declan roared, his voice carrying the alpha command that forced everyone within 100 feet to submit. Nurses dropped clipboards. Dr. Eris, the pack's head physician, a stern man in his 50s with graying temples, sprinted down the hallway. He stopped short when he saw the alpha. Declan was covered in mud and blood, shirtless, clutching a bundle of wet blankets that seemed to be moving on its own. Alpha. What is? Hypothermia. Severe malnutrition. Postpartum hemorrhaging. Declan rattled off the symptoms, his eyes wild. He laid Sienna onto the gurney. When the nurses peeled back the blanket, a collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. "Sweet goddess," Dr. Eris whispered. He wasn't looking at Sienna's emaciated frame. He was looking at the 9 pups that were blindly crawling over her, distressed by the sudden lights and noise. "Incubators. Now," Eris barked, snapping into professional mode. "Get the neonates to the NICU. I need a shifting specialist in here." Code red. "Do not separate them from her unless necessary," Declan growled, grabbing Eris's wrist. They are mine." Eris looked at Declan, then at the pups, and finally at Sienna. The confusion in the doctor's eyes matched Declan's internal chaos. "Declan, she's been missing for 24 months. Wolf gestation is 5 months. Unless you've been visiting her in secret, the timeline is impossible. Just save her." As the medical team swarmed, separating the whimpery pups into heated baskets and hooking Sienna up to IV fluids and warming blankets, Declan was ushered out of the room. He collapsed onto the plastic chairs in the hallway, putting his head in his hands. He was vibrating with leftover adrenaline. The timeline. Dr. Eris was right. If she had been gone 2 years, and these pups were newborns, which they clearly were, their umbilical stumps were still healing, then Declan couldn't be the father. But the bond, the pull he felt toward those pups was gravitational, and the mark on the black pup's chest, that wasn't a coincidence. "Declan?" The voice came from the end of the hall. It was sharp, polished, and utterly out of place in the chaos. Vanessa Roche stood there, high heels clicking on the linoleum, wearing a pristine white trench coat. She was the daughter of the neighboring Alpha, and for the last year, the council had been pressuring Declan to take her as his chosen mate to solidify the alliance. She looked at the blood on his hands, her nose wrinkled slightly. "I heard the alarm," she said, her voice smooth but her eyes darting to the trauma room doors. "Is it true? Did you find a rogue?" "Not a rogue," Declan said, standing up. He towered over her. "Sienna." Vanessa's face did something strange. For a microsecond, the mask slipped not to shock, but to something sharper. Fear? Calculation? Then it smoothed over into practiced concern. "Sienna?" She placed a hand on her chest. "But she's dead. We held a funeral, Declan. You carried the casket. The casket was empty. Vanessa, you know that. I know you're grieving." She stepped closer, reaching for his arm. "But finding a look-alike, a stray in the woods, don't do this to yourself. The council is arriving tomorrow to finalize our union contract. If you bring a feral wolf into the pack house now..." "She had pups," Declan interrupted, watching her reaction closely. Vanessa froze. Her hand dropped from his arm. "Pups? Plural? 9. 9? Vanessa laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "That's disgusting. That's a litter for a dog, Declan, not a wolf." She's clearly been bred by a rogue mutt. If that thing in there really is Sienna, she's been feral for years. She's compromised. You can't let those things live in the pack. It's against the purity laws. Declan felt the growl start low in his chest. You're talking about my wife. I'm talking about the stability of the region, Vanessa snapped. You are the Alpha King. You cannot raise a bastard litter of 9 runts fathered by God knows who. The door to the trauma room opened. Dr. Aris stepped out. He looked pale. He held a clipboard against his chest like a shield. Alpha, Aris said, ignoring Vanessa. We've stabilized Sienna. She's in a coma, likely induced by her wolf to heal the trauma. But we ran the blood panels on the pups. Declan held his breath. Vanessa stepped closer, her eyes narrowing. And? Vanessa demanded. Tell him they're mongrels so we can handle this. Dr. Aris looked at Vanessa, then looked Declan dead in the eye. They aren't mongrels, Aris said quietly. We ran a paternity sequence. It's a match, Declan. You are the father. Silence slammed into the hallway. That's impossible, Vanessa hissed. He hasn't touched her in 2 years. There's more, Aris continued, his voice trembling slightly. We did a bone density scan on the pups. They aren't newborns. Declan frowned. They fit in my hand. Their eyes are shut. They are in a state of stasis, Aris explained. Biologically, they were born 6 months after she went missing. But something, or someone, gave them a suppressor. A chemical agent that halted their growth, kept them in a permanent newborn state for 18 months. Sienna didn't just keep them alive last night, Declan. She's been keeping them in suspended animation for a 1.5 years, likely to hide their scent. To hide them. Declan felt the blood drain from his face. She hadn't run away. She had been hiding, and she had drugged their children to keep them small, to keep them quiet. Why? Declan whispered. Because? A weak voice croaked from the doorway. Everyone turned. Sienna was standing there, leaning heavily against the doorframe, IV lines trailing behind her. She was swaying, but her eyes were locked on Vanessa. Because? Sienna rasped, pointing a shaking, bloodied finger at Vanessa. She told me that if the Alpha King knew about the abominations, he would kill them himself. Sienna looked at Declan, tears cutting tracks through the dirt on her face. You sent the order, Declan. I saw your signature on the execution warrant. The silence in the hospital corridor was heavier than the storm raging outside. It wasn't empty silence. It was a vacuum, sucking the air out of the room until everyone's lungs burned. Sienna's accusation hung in the air like smoke. You sent the order. Declan looked at his mate. She was barely holding herself upright, her knuckles white as she gripped the doorframe of the trauma room. But it was her eyes that destroyed him. 2 years ago, those eyes used to look at him with a warmth that could melt the winter frost. Now, they held a terror so profound it made his wolf whimper in the back of his mind. She wasn't looking at her husband. She was looking at an executioner. Sienna. Declan stepped forward, his hand outstretched, palm up, the universal sign of submission. I would never. Stay back, Sienna screamed. The sound wasn't a roar. It was a jagged tear of panic. She scrambled backward, tripping over her own IV line. The pole crashed to the floor with a deafening clatter. Blood bloomed instantly in the tube where the needle jerked in her vein. Restrain her! She's ripping her stitches, Dr. Aris barked. 2 nurses rushed forward, but Sienna fought them with the feral desperation of a mother cornered. She wasn't fighting for her life. She was fighting to get back to the room where her 9 children lay defenseless. Don't let him near them, she sobbed, thrashing as Aris injected a sedative into her arm. He'll drown them. He said he'd drown the litter. Declan stood frozen. The words hit him like physical blows. Drown them. Declan, look at her. Vanessa's voice cut through the chaos, smooth and reasonable. She stepped up beside him, her perfume, expensive roses, and musk clashing violently with the metallic scent of blood. She is psychotic. 2 years in the wild, eating rot, living like a beast. She's hallucinating. She doesn't know what she's saying. Declan slowly turned his head to look at Vanessa. His face was a mask of stone, but his eyes were glowing a faint, dangerous violet, the sign of an alpha, losing control. She didn't hallucinate the pups, Declan said, his voice dropping to a subsonic rumble that vibrated in the floorboards. And she didn't hallucinate the warrant. She mentioned a signature. Vanessa didn't flinch. She was good, terrifyingly good. She adjusted the collar of her white trench coat, her expression one of pity. Paranoia is a common symptom of isolation trauma, Declan. She probably convinced herself you hated her to justify running away. Maybe she found a scrap of paper and imagined it was a warrant. The mind breaks easily. Alpha, Kieran, the beta, jogged up the hallway, 2 enforcers behind him. We've secured the perimeter. No one in, no one out. What are your orders? Declan looked at Sienna, who was now limp in the nurse's arms, the sedative taking hold. Her head lolled back, tears still wet on her grime-streaked cheeks. Take the Luna to the high-security suite, Declan ordered, his voice flat. Put 2 guards on the door. No one enters without my direct biometric clearance. Not even the medical staff unless I am present. And her? Kieran nodded toward Vanessa. Vanessa straightened her spine. I am the daughter of Alpha Roche of the Southern Territory. You cannot order me. Escort Miss Roche to the guest wing, Declan interrupted. He stepped into Vanessa's personal space, towering over her. You are not to leave the pack house. You are not to make calls. You are not to speak to your father. This is an act of war, Declan, Vanessa hissed, her mask finally slipping to reveal the viper beneath. Holding a visiting dignitary prisoner because of the ramblings of a madwoman? My father will burn Stone River to the ground. Let him try, Declan said softly. If I find out you forged that signature, Vanessa, I won't need an army to destroy you. I'll do it with my teeth. He turned his back on her. Get her out of my sight. As the guards escorted a furious Vanessa away, Declan walked into the trauma room where Sienna had been. It was empty now, save for the bloody IV pole. He walked to the sink and gripped the porcelain until it cracked. He needed to see the evidence. Sienna said she saw a warrant, a physical piece of paper. If she had been running for 2 years, she must have kept it. It was the anchor of her fear. Dr. Eris, Declan called out as the doctor returned, looking shaken. Where are her clothes? The rags she was wearing. In the biohazard bin. We were going to incinerate them. Don't. Declan walked over to the yellow bin in the corner. He didn't care about the filth. He pulled out the tattered remains of what used to be a heavy wool coat too big for her, likely stolen from a scarecrow or a clothesline. He patted the pockets. Empty. He checked the lining. He felt a crinkle. With trembling fingers, Declan ripped the lining of the coat open. Inside, wrapped in 3 layers of plastic, Ziploc bags that had been taped shut to be waterproof, was a folded document. He peeled away the plastic. The paper was worn, soft as fabric from being folded and unfolded 1,000 times. He opened it. Official decree of the Stone River Pack. Subject: termination of genetic aberrations. Target: the litter of Sienna Brooks. Reason: violation of purity laws. Unnatural quantity implies demonic or rogue corruption. Sentence: immediate death by drowning. And there, at the bottom, stamped with the royal seal, was his signature. Declan O'Malley. Declan stared at it. He knew his own hand. The loop of the D, the sharp strike of the Y. It was perfect. If he didn't know he hadn't signed it, he would have testified in court that he had. But then he noticed something. A tiny detail. The date next to the signature was written as Oct 12th. Declan never wrote dates with the Declan. He was military trained. He always wrote 12 Oct or 10/12. Someone had studied his signature perfectly but didn't know his habits. He brought the paper to his nose and inhaled deep. The scent was old, faded paper, ink, and the overwhelming smell of Sienna's fear. But underneath that, a faint, chemical trace. Lavender and sulfur, cheap toner ink, and a specific brand of hand sanitizer used in the archives. Declan carefully refolded the paper. His heart was no longer racing. It had slowed to a cold, rhythmic thud. This wasn't just Vanessa. She was the architect, maybe, but she had help from inside his administration. Someone with access to his seal. Someone with access to the archives. He wasn't just an alpha husband anymore. He was a hunter, and the prey was in his own house. 3 hours later, the hospital was quiet, settled into the uneasy rhythm of the post-crisis shift. Declan stood in front of the observation window of the neonatal intensive care unit NICU. The glass was thick, soundproof, and cold against his forehead. Inside, 9 incubators were arranged in a semicircle. The soft beep of heart monitors was the only music in the room. They are stable, Dr. Eris said, walking up quietly to stand beside his alpha. He held a tablet in his hands. But Declan, you need to understand the biology of what we are looking at. Declan didn't look away from the center incubator. The black pup, the one with the star on his chest, was twitching in his sleep. Tell me. We found high concentrations of aconite and veratrum in Sienna's blood, Eris explained. his voice hushed, but also a synthetic hormone called Somnium B. It's a growth inhibitor. It's illegal, banned in all 50 territories. Where would she get it? She didn't buy it. She was making it, Eris said. We found trace amounts of processed herbs under her fingernails. She was foraging for wolfsbane and crushing it, mixing it with her own blood to create a crude version of the suppressor. Then, she was feeding it to them. Declan closed his eyes. Wolfsbane was poison to their kind. It burned. It felt like swallowing liquid fire. She was poisoning them? Declan asked, his voice cracking. She was keeping them small, Eris corrected him gently. Wolf pups grow fast. Within 3 months, they would have been the size of toddlers. They would have been running, howling. She couldn't hide 9 growing wolves in a watchtower. To keep them hidden, she had to keep them as infants. She had to stunt their growth intentionally. Eris swiped on his tablet, bringing up a chart. The pain they felt, it would have been constant, but it kept them alive. If they had grown, your patrols would have found them, or the winter would have starved them. A mother who hurts her children to save them from what she thinks is a butcher. I cannot imagine the psychological toll that took on her. Declan pressed his hand flat against the glass. He imagined Sienna, alone in the dark, forcing drops of poison into the mouths of the things she loved most, weeping while she did it, believing she was saving them from their father. Is the damage permanent? Declan asked. We don't know yet. Once the inhibitor clears their system, they should start aging rapidly to catch up to their biological age. They might have a massive growth spurt in the next few weeks. It will be painful. They will need a lot of food, and they will need their father's scent to ground them. They have it, Declan vowed. Alpha, Eris hesitated. There is one more thing. The DNA test. It confirmed you are the father, yes, but it also flagged a genetic anomaly in the pups. All 9 of them. Declan finally turned to look at the doctor. What anomaly? They all carry the Delta gene. Declan stopped breathing. The Delta gene was a myth, a legend from the First Wars. It was said that the original wolf packs weren't ruled by one alpha, but by a council of Delta's wolves with the strength of an alpha, but the empathy of a healer. They were war enders. Impossible, Declan whispered. The Delta line died out 300 years ago. Genetics don't disappear, Declan. They go dormant. You carry the recessive trait. Sienna carries it. The probability of 2 carriers meeting is 1 in a million. The probability of them producing a litter of 9 active deltas? Aris shook his head. It's not biology. It's destiny. If the council finds out what they are, Vanessa won't be the only one trying to kill them. Every alpha in the continent will view them as a threat to their throne. The stakes had just shifted from a domestic tragedy to a geopolitical nightmare. These weren't just pups. They were a new dynasty. Lock the files, Declan commanded. Delete the digital copies. Burn the hard drive. If anyone asks, they are runts, weaklings. Understood? Understood. Declan left the window and walked down the hall to room 402. The guard stepped aside. He scanned his fingerprint, and the lock clicked open. The room was dim. Sienna was awake. She was sitting up in the bed, staring out the window at the storm. She had been washed, her hair brushed out, revealing the copper shine he remembered. But she looked frail, lost in the hospital gown that swallowed her frame. Declan didn't approach the bed. He grabbed a chair and sat near the door, giving her 20 feet of space. I didn't sign it, he said into the darkness. Sienna didn't turn. I saw your hand. I know your signature. The date was wrong, Declan said. I write the day first. The warrant had the month first. Sienna's shoulders stiffened. She turned her head slowly. Her eyes were dull, exhausted. A typo? That's your defense? A typo? No, Declan said. My defense is that I spent 730 days looking for you. My defense is that I sleep in the guest room because our bed smells like you and I can't stand it. My defense is that I am the Alpha King, and if I wanted our children dead, I wouldn't have needed a warrant. I would have done it. It was a harsh truth, but it landed. Sienna watched him, searching his face for the monster she had built in her mind. Who gave it to you? Declan asked softly. Who brought you the warrant? Sienna looked down at her hands. I was in the safe house, the one by the river. I was waiting for you. My water had just broken. I was terrified because there were so many heartbeats. I thought I was dying. She took a shaky breath. A man came to the door. He wore a hooded cloak, wet from the rain. He didn't speak. He just slid the envelope under the door and left. But, Declan leaned forward. He walked with a limp, Sienna whispered. A heavy drag of the left leg, and he smelled like peppermints and old paper. Declan's mind raced. A limp. Peppermints. The image clicked instantly. Arthur Finch, the pack's archivist. The old man who had served Declan's father. The man who managed the royal seal. He had a bad hip from the War of '99. He always sucked on peppermint candies to hide the smell of the preservation chemicals. Arthur Finch was one of the most trusted elders in the pack. He had held Declan as a baby. Arthur. Declan breathed out, the betrayal tasting like ash. Is he? Sienna's voice trembled. Is he one of yours? He was. Declan stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. Now he is a dead man walking. He walked to the side of the bed. Sienna flinched, pulling her knees to her chest. Declan stopped. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the folded warrant. He placed it on the bedside table. I am going to find him, Sienna. And I am going to bring him here. And you are going to watch him tell the truth. He turned to leave, but Sienna's voice stopped him. Declan? He paused at the door. The pups, she whispered. Did you count them? Yes, Declan said, his voice thick with emotion. 9. I counted 9. Good, she closed her eyes, a single tear escaping. Because the warrant only listed 8. Declan froze. What? The warrant listed 8 pups, Sienna said, opening her eyes, terror returning. The black one, the one with the star. He was the last born. He was born after I got the letter. Whoever wants them dead, they don't know about the 9th one. Declan felt a chill that had nothing to do with the storm. If the enemy thought there were 8, and they did a head count, he realized with horror that he had just left the pups unguarded, with only Dr. Eris and the standard night crew. If Arthur Finch was the inside man, he had access to the security codes. He had access to the hospital. And if he knew there were supposed to be 8 dead pups, and he found 9 live ones. Stay here, Declan roared, ripping the door open. He shifted mid-stride, clothes shredding as he exploded into his black wolf form, claws scrabbling on the linoleum as he sprinted back toward the NICU. The alarm system began to wail. Code black, NICU breach. Someone was already there. The hospital corridor was a tunnel of strobe light red. The emergency sirens were deafening, a rhythmic wail that synced with the pounding of Declan's heart. In his massive wolf form, paws sliding on the polished linoleum, Declan was a battering ram of fur and muscle. He didn't bother with the keypad at the end of the hall. He hit the double doors of the neonatal intensive care unit with his shoulder, the reinforced steel buckling under the impact of a furious alpha. Glass shattered, metal groaned. The doors flew off their hinges, skidding across the floor. Declan skidded to a halt, his claws gouging deep grooves into the tile to stop his momentum. A low, vibrating growl ripped from his throat, shaking the very air in the room. The NICU was plunged in darkness, save for the red emergency lights. The hum of the incubators, the mechanical wombs keeping his children alive, had stopped. Silence. The most terrifying sound a parent can hear. Standing over the central cluster of machines was a figure dressed in the gray custodial uniform of the hospital staff. He held a canister of pressurized gas halothane, a heavy anesthetic used to euthanize injured wolves painlessly. The man had already disconnected the oxygen lines to 3 of the incubators. Declan didn't think. He launched himself. The intruder turned, his eyes widening behind a surgical mask. He wasn't a warrior. He was a cleaner, a hired hand. He fumbled for a stun baton at his belt, but he was too slow. Declan hit him midair. The impact sounded like a car crash. The man flew backward, smashing into a supply cabinet, shelves of saline bags and gauze raining down on him. Declan pinned him to the floor, his massive jaws snapping inches from the man's throat. Don't kill him, the human part of Declan's brain screamed. He knows who sent him. But the wolf wanted blood. The wolf smelled the gas leaking from the canister. The wolf knew his pups were suffocating. Alpha, Dr. Eris's voice cut through the red haze. The doctor had run in behind him, followed by 2 security enforcers. The oxygen! Get the lines back on. Ignore the intruder. Save the pups. Declan snarled, snapping the intruder's arm with a sickening crunch to ensure he wouldn't move, then backed away. He shifted back to human form, naked and panting, his body steaming in the cold air of the room. Get them back online, Declan roared, scrambling to the nearest incubator. Inside, the tiny russet-colored pup was still. Its chest wasn't moving. Breathe, Declan whispered, his large hands fumbling with the delicate plastic tubing. He reconnected the valve. He tapped the glass. "Breathe, damn it!" A hiss of oxygen filled the chamber. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then, the pup gasped a tiny jerking motion of its entire body and let out a high-pitched mewl of distress. "Status," Declan barked, moving to the next one. 1 and 2 are stable, Aris shouted, moving with practiced speed. 3 is hypoxic but recovering. 4 through 7 are clear he didn't get to them in time. 8? Declan demanded, looking at the incubator near the window. "Checking 8 now." Aris ran to the unit. He checked the monitor. He paled. Heart rate is dropping. The valve was cut, not just disconnected. "I need a manual bag. Get me a pediatric resuscitator." A nurse threw him the bag. Aris opened the incubator, reaching in to manually pump air into the tiny gray wolf's lungs. Declan stood in the center of the room, his chest heaving, his eyes scanning the carnage. 8 incubators, 7 stable, 1 critical. Wait. His eyes darted to the corner of the room, to the shadow behind the heavy surgical curtain. The intruder had disconnected the main row. He had counted 8 units, but there was a 9th. Hidden away in the quarantine isolation unit because of his low body temperature, the black pup with the white star on his chest lay in a separate glass box. Declan walked over to it slowly. The intruder hadn't touched it. The red light of the machine was steady. Heart rate, 140 BPM. Oxygen, 98%. The killer hadn't known the 9th pup existed, just like the warrant. Declan looked down at his son. The pup was sleeping, oblivious to the chaos that had almost wiped out his entire generation. But as Declan watched, the pup's eyes, which had been sealed shut since birth, began to twitch. The effects of the suppressor drug were fading fast. Slowly, painfully, one eyelid peeled open. It wasn't the milky blue of a newborn. It was a piercing, unnatural violet, the color of royalty, the color of an alpha, or something more. The pup looked directly at Declan. It didn't whine. It didn't cry. It let out a huff of air that fogged the glass, and then, in the silence of the room, it growled. It was a tiny sound, like sandpaper on stone, but it made the hair on Declan's arms stand up. "You saw him, didn't you?" Declan whispered to the glass. "You were watching him." Alpha, Kieran, the beta, appeared at the shattered doorway. He looked grim. "We have the intruder in custody. He's a janitor. Low level. He says he was paid in crypto. He doesn't know the name of the buyer." "He knows," Declan said, turning away from the miracle in the box. His face hardened into a mask of cold fury. "He just needs the right motivation to remember." "And Arthur Finch?" Kieran asked. "We found his office empty. His hard drives were wiped." "Lock down the perimeter," Declan ordered. "Arthur isn't a runner. He's an old man with a bad hip. He's hiding in the one place he thinks I won't look." "Where?" Declan grabbed a hospital gown from the counter and pulled it on. "The crypts," Declan said. "Where my father is buried." The Stone River Pack Cemetery was a sprawling acreage of ancient pines and marble headstones, located 3 miles behind the main estate. But beneath the earth lay the royal crypts, a labyrinth of stone tunnels where the bones of the O'Malley line had rested for 4 centuries. It was damp, cold, and smelled of wet earth and incense. Declan walked down the stone steps, a torch in his hand. He didn't bring guards. This was family business. He found Arthur Finch sitting on the stone bench in front of the tomb of Alpha King Magnus O'Malley, Declan's father. Arthur looked small in the gloom. He was wearing his heavy tweed coat, a tartan scarf wrapped around his thin neck. His cane rested against the marble sarcophagus. He was eating a peppermint candy, the crunching sound echoing loudly in the silence. He didn't look up when Declan approached. "I used to bounce you on my knee right here," Arthur said, his voice scratchy and calm. "While your father prayed for wisdom, I would teach you the names of the constellations. You forged my signature," Declan said. He didn't yell. The rage had settled into something colder, heavier. "You sent a death warrant to my pregnant wife. You forced her to live like an animal for 2 years." Arthur stopped chewing. He sighed, a cloud of minty vapor rising in the cold air. "I saved the pack, Declan. Or I tried to. You call killing my children saving the pack? They aren't just children, boy," Arthur snapped, finally looking up. His eyes were watery, rimmed with red, but fierce with conviction. "They are a genetic catastrophe. Do you know why the deltas were wiped out? Do you think it was an accident?" Arthur struggled to his feet, leaning heavily on his cane. He pointed a shaking finger at the tomb behind him. Your father knew. The prophecy of the Stone River states that when the 9 are born of the star and the moon, the hierarchy will shatter. The deltas don't submit, Declan. They don't follow alphas. They share power. They operate as a hive mind. Arthur took a step forward. 9 wolves who cannot be commanded. 9 wolves who are stronger than you, faster than you, and loyal only to each other. If they grow up, Stone River ceases to be a kingdom. It becomes a committee, and in this world, committees get slaughtered by rival packs. Declan stared at the old man. You did this out of fear of a fairy tale? It is not a fairy tale, Arthur hissed. I ran the blood tests myself when Sienna was first pregnant. I saw the markers. I told your father before he died. He made me swear to protect the line. He made me swear to prune the branch if it grew too wild. My father is dead. Declan stepped closer. And I am the king now. You are a soft-hearted boy, Arthur spat. You would let your sentimentality destroy 1,000 years of tradition. I sent the warrant to scare her off. I hoped the cold would take them. Nature is cruel, but it is clean. But she was more resilient than I calculated. Who helped you? Declan asked. The janitor in the hospital, the suppression drugs. You didn't do this alone. Arthur smiled, a sad, broken smile. The snake in the grass is rarely the one hissing. Declan. Sometimes it's the flower next to it. Vanessa, Declan said the name like a curse. Vanessa Roche has ambition, Arthur admitted. She wants to be queen. When I told her about the anomaly, she saw an opportunity. She funded the search parties not to find Sienna, but to ensure she stayed lost. She provided the tracking data to keep your patrols away from the northern ridge. Declan felt the betrayal in his marrow. His intended bonded mate, the woman who had held his hand at state dinners, had been actively hunting his wife. And tonight? Declan asked. Who ordered the hit on the NICU? That wasn't me, Arthur said quietly. He looked at the tomb of Magnus. I wanted them gone, yes. But I am not a butcher of infants. I wanted them to never be born. Killing them in a hospital bed? That is Vanessa's work. She is cleaning up loose ends. And I imagine... Arthur looked at Declan with pity. I am a loose end too. Click. The sound came from the shadows at the top of the stairs. Declan spun around. Silhouetted against the moonlight at the entrance of the crypt stood 3 figures. They wore the tactical black gear of the Southern Pack's elite guard, Vanessa's personal security detail, and they were holding silenced rifles. Alpha Roche sends his regards, the leader said. Get down, Declan roared, shoving Arthur behind his father's sarcophagus. 3 shots rang out. Thwip, twip, twip. Stone chips exploded from the statue of Magnus O'Malley. Declan didn't have time to shift. He grabbed the heavy iron candelabra from the altar and hurled it like a javelin. It struck the lead gunman in the chest, crumpling his armor. Arthur, stay down, Declan commanded. He needed to shift, but the tunnel was too narrow. If he turned into his wolf form here, he'd be wedged in, a sitting duck for the bullets. He had to fight as a man. He vaulted over the sarcophagus, using the darkness of the crypt to his advantage. He knew every inch of this tomb. He had played hide-and-seek here as a child. The second gunman moved forward, scanning with a laser sight. Declan dropped from the ceiling. He had climbed the stone reliefs on the wall and landed on the man's shoulders. He twisted the man's neck before he hit the ground. The third gunman panicked and fired blindly into the dark. A bullet grazed Declan's ribs, searing like a hot iron. Declan lunged, knocking the gun away, and drove his fist into the man's temple. The guard collapsed. Silence returned to the crypt, heavier than before. Declan stood panting, blood dripping from his side. He walked back to the sarcophagus. Arthur, he called out. It's clear. We need to move. Vanessa knows you're here. There was no answer. Declan walked around the marble tomb. Arthur Finch was slumped against the cold stone of the king's grave. He was still clutching his cane, but there was a small, neat hole in the center of his chest, one of the stray bullets from the panic fire. Declan knelt beside the old man. Arthur's eyes were open, staring up at the ceiling, at the stone carvings of the constellations he had loved to teach. His mouth moved weakly. Declan. Arthur wheezed, pink froth bubbling on his lips. Save your breath, Declan said, pressing his hand over the wound. Though he knew it was fatal, the bullet had hit the lung. The book, Arthur whispered. My office. False bottom. Under the inkwell. What book? The true lineage, Arthur gasped, his eyes losing focus. Vanessa. She isn't. Who she says. Arthur Finch shuddered once. His hand tightened on Declan's wrist, then went limp. The peppermint candy rolled out of his hand and clicked onto the stone floor. The keeper of secrets was dead. Declan closed the old man's eyes. He stood up, pain radiating from his ribcage, but a colder resolve settling in his heart. Arthur had been a traitor. Yes, but he had been a traitor with a conscience. Vanessa was something else entirely. She had sent death squads into the royal crypts. She had tried to gas his children. She had declared war. But Arthur's last words stuck in his mind. Vanessa isn't who she says. Declan checked the pockets of the dead gunmen. They had encrypted radios. They had Southern Pack insignia. He grabbed one of the radios. He could hear the static, and then a voice. Target neutralized? Over. It was Vanessa's voice. Declan pressed the transmit button. He held it to his lips. You missed, Declan said. There was a long silence on the other end. Declan? Her voice faltered, just for a second. Run, Declan said. Run as far as you can, Vanessa, because I'm coming for you, and I'm bringing the pack. He crushed the radio in his hand. He had to get back to the hospital. He had to get Sienna and the pups out. The pack house was compromised. The crypts were compromised. Nowhere was safe, except maybe the one place Sienna had survived for 2 years, the watchtower. But first, he had to find the book in Arthur's office. If Vanessa wasn't who she said she was, then the alliance with the South was a lie. And if the alliance was a lie, then Stone River was surrounded by enemies they didn't even know existed. Declan moved through the shadows of the pack house like a phantom. His ribs burned where the bullet had grazed him, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the cold fury in his chest. He reached Arthur Finch's office. It had been tossed papers everywhere, drawers pulled out. Vanessa's goons had been looking for leverage, but they didn't know Arthur like Declan did. He swept the heavy brass inkwell off the mahogany desk. Beneath it, a tiny seam in the wood was visible only to an alpha's eye. He dug his claw in and popped the false bottom. There, resting on a bed of velvet, was a small, leather-bound ledger, the lineage of the Southern Territories. Declan flipped it open, his eyes scanning the faded calligraphy until he found the Roche family tree. He traced the line down to the current generation. Alpha Roche, wife, Meredith. Offspring, Vanessa born, 1,996, died 1,998. Declan stopped. He reread the line. Died 1,998. Cause, fever. The woman currently sitting in his guest wing. The woman demanding his hand in marriage. The woman who had tried to gas his children. She wasn't Vanessa Roche. She was an imposter. A planted agent using a dead girl's name to infiltrate the royal bloodlines. You aren't a princess, Declan growled, pocketing the book. You're a cuckoo bird. He didn't go to confront her. That would come later. Right now he had 9 heartbeats to protect. He sprinted back to the hospital wing. The hallways were eerily quiet. Kieran had locked down the sector, cutting the power to the elevators to trap any remaining assassins. When Declan burst into the NICU, the scene stopped him dead. Dr. Eris was gone. The nurses were gone. Sienna was standing in the center of the room. She was no longer the frail, broken victim he had found in the tower. She had ripped the IVs from her arm. She was wearing a stolen doctor's coat over her hospital gown, and she was holding a scalpel in one hand, positioning herself between the door and the portable incubators. Sienna, Declan breathed, holding up his hands. She lowered the blade, her shoulders sagging with relief. I thought you were them. We have to go, Declan said, moving to the transport units. The pack house is compromised. Vanessa isn't who she says she is. She's brought an army inside our walls. Where can we go? Sienna asked, grabbing the handle of the transport rig that held the 4 smallest pups. Declan, nowhere is safe. Declan looked at her. He looked at the 9 tiny lives humming in the machines. He looked at the black pup with the white star, who was watching him with those impossible violet eyes. We don't go to a safe house, Declan said, his voice hard with a new kind of authority. We go to the old territory, the place where the deltas used to rule, the mountains. That's a ruin, Sienna argued. It's wild, it's forbidden. It's a fortress, Declan corrected. And it's the only place big enough for a new dynasty. He helped her push the units toward the loading bay. As the automatic doors hissed open to the rainy night, Kieran pulled up in a blackened, armored SUV. They loaded the incubators in silence. Sienna climbed into the back seat, curling her body around the machinery to keep them warm. Declan stood by the driver's door for a moment, looking back at the towering stone structure of his ancestral home. He could see lights flickering in the guest wing. He could smell the faint scent of kerosene. Vanessa was burning the evidence. "Alpha?" Kieran asked, gripping the steering wheel. "Are we retreating?" Declan got in and slammed the door. He looked at Sienna in the rearview mirror. Her eyes met his fierce, golden, and finally, full of trust. "No," Declan said as the engine roared to life. "We aren't retreating, Kieran. We're just moving the capital." As the car sped off into the stormy night, leaving the Stone River pack house behind, the black pup in the back seat let out a long, clear howl. It wasn't a cry for help, it was a declaration of war. And that is the end of Season 1 of the Alpha's Lost Dynasty. Declan and Sienna have escaped the trap, but they've left their kingdom in the hands of an imposter. Vanessa isn't just a jealous rival, she is a ghost wearing a dead girl's name, and she has the entire Southern Army behind her. Now, hiding in the Forbidden Mountains with 9 pups who carry the legendary Delta gene, Declan has to raise an army from scratch. But the biggest question remains: who is the Vanessa imposter really working for? And what happens when those 9 pups wake up and realize their true power? If you want to see Declan retake his throne in Season 2, you need to destroy that like button. Let's hit 10,000 likes to unlock the next chapter. Subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss the war that is coming. Thanks for listening.
Hi, my name is Mountain Confessions, the owner and manager of Mountain Confessions. After watching the video, the Alpha King found his missing Luna. Lying beside 9 pups she had kept alive all night. I'd really like to know what you think. How did this story make you feel? What stayed with me most was the sense of devotion and quiet strength at the heart of this story. It highlights how care, responsibility, and determination can shine through even in the most difficult circumstances. Beyond the dramatic moments, I felt the story was really about loyalty, resilience, and the powerful bonds that connect people to those they protect. One gentle lesson I took from it is that true character often shows itself when no one is watching and when challenges are at their greatest. Which moment had the biggest impact on you? And did this story change the way you viewed any of the characters as it unfolded? Maybe there's a reminder here to appreciate the people in our lives who consistently show up for others, often without expecting recognition. If this story meant something to you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoy stories like this, feel free to like or subscribe. Thanks for spending some time with us today.